I truly wasn't expecting anything from the Outriders team until later this week, and even then I wasn't expecting anything that substantial, as they had just come off that large round of mod changes that they made. Included in last week's patch was that long-awaited and epically failed player appreciation package, and if anything, you would have thought that the squad at PCF would attempt to lay low for a bit and try and let things blow over. Well, based on this massive wall of text posted to Reddit yesterday, the comm dev team at PCF chose option B and uploaded another lengthy Outriders explanation, this time attempting to explain how damage and damage mitigation is calculated in-game. And although there is quite a bit of useful information that I will cover in a bit, it also flies in the face of the entire in-game experience and how it was developed. What's going on, everybody? It's LtBuzzLitebeer, and I'm back with another Outriders upload. But before we get into this damage explained deep dive, in case you aren't yet a sub, please smash that sub button for more intensive Outriders content, and don't forget to ring the bell to never miss another upload notification from my channel. There's a lot going on here, so let's dive right in. As always, I will leave a link to this entire wall of text posted over on the official Outriders Reddit in the video description below. And if you have enough time, I encourage you all to go over there and check it out. First up, I would be remiss if I did not mention this header graphic and how it seems to make a major blunder when it titles this entire post Damage Control. I mean, they could have said Damage Explained or even Damage 101, but this title of Damage Control was clearly not thought entirely through, and even if it isn't intended, hints that this article is posted to limit the damage the changes the dev team have made to this game. Anyways, let's jump into the meat of this post, and I will attempt to paraphrase all these different damage types and their effects into smaller, easier to understand bites, starting off with resistance. Now, this specific type of damage mitigation is designed to lessen the effects of anomaly damage. All enemy non-melee abilities and elemental attacks are counted as anomaly. So resistance does not protect you from physical damage, such as a melee attack or even bullets. Resistance reduces the incoming anomaly damage by the given percentage. So if you have, say, 20% resistance on your skill tree setup, if you are hit with an anomaly damage effect, like say the Broodmother Eruption, the maximum overall effect of this attack is reduced by your resistance percentage, in this case, 20%. Now, resistance is capped at a maximum obtainable value of 85%. The opposite of resistance is armor, and this is the mechanic that protects our characters from physical damage, which includes melee and ranged weapon attacks, like those OP riflemen that seem to be able to rip you to shreds at the end of Boomtown. Well, that is because they inflict high levels of physical damage versus your character. Also, anomaly damage ignores armor, so even if you're rocking huge amounts of armor stacking mods, a big anomaly bomb, like from Dr. Detonator, will completely ignore all your armor and just blast you to bits. Armor is scaled to your world or challenge tier based on an armor reference value. What we see in our player stats under the header of physical damage reduction shows our reduction values against the highest unlocked level enemies. Also, armor does not have a cap, but physical damage reduction derived from armor is capped at, again, 85%. Shields, like what the Trickster class uses, block both types of damage, anomaly and physical, based on the values of your setup for resistance and armor. Shields are best described as an additional health bar, and the strength of the shield is based on your character's health pool. So the more health you stack onto your build, the more damage your shield can absorb before being fully depleted. Additionally, shields protect you from being affected by knockbacks and interrupts. Now, the Trickster shield has an additional 5% damage reduction that reduces final damage taken. Now, I know I've been paraphrasing here for a bit, but I did want to jump in on this one and say that even while on my Trickster class and up on full or high amounts of shields, I consistently do get slapped around, which includes knockbacks and being completely knocked to the ground. So apparently, this definition and how this mechanic actually works do not coincide. Continuing on, and the next section of this Reddit post has to do with damage reduction nodes and mods. Now, if you select a node or mod that provides some sort of reduces incoming damage from X enemy type, the final damage calculation step is multiplying damage through modifiers. So if you have a node unlocked that says 25% less damage from elites, this means that the node will reduce the final damage taken by an elite by 25%. Status effects that inflict damage against our characters are considered anomaly damage based and are therefore mitigated by resistance, not armor. Now this mechanic also applies to shields, as they will deal normal damage versus the shield, mitigated by your resistance percentage. Healing and health regen is based on a chronological order of incoming damage and healing to determine if the character will be able to benefit from certain protections before hitting 0 HP and ultimately dying. Now, if there is a healing, shield, health regen effect before the next damage intake, it is taken into account. Now, once a character reaches 0 HP, even if a burst of healing immediately follows them hitting 0, no healing will help the player and they are dead. And finally, this Reddit article explains how both weakness and vulnerability mechanics work in the game. Now, essentially, weakness is applied to a target to reduce outgoing damage from that player or enemy target by 33%. Vulnerability increases damage to a target by 15%. Now, both of these status effects can be applied to us by enemies or by us to enemy targets through our skill tree nodes or mods. Now, I know that's a lot to take in. But in this next section of the Reddit post, we finally get to see how certain hidden mechanics work. And these involve what we refer to as these one-shot preventions. Now, I don't want to spell these out for you line by line, but essentially, we have 3 survivability mechanics working behind the scenes to keep us alive, or hopefully keep us alive. First is the primary death prevention, and this one prevents us from dropping below 30% of health due to incoming damage, and once triggered, will stay active for 1.2 seconds and has a 120-second cooldown timer, which is not visible on your screen. The secondary death prevention mechanic prevents us from dropping below 10% of health due to incoming damage, and once triggered, stays active for 2.1 seconds and has a 60-second cooldown. And finally, there is this spike damage protection, which if a player were to take a single hit that takes more than 65% of a player's max HP, its value is limited to just that, 65%. Now, this spike damage protection is 65% until Challenge Tier 9, where it starts to scale up to a max value of 84.5% at Challenge Tier 15. So enemy damage output scales with tiers. So as you go higher and higher in the challenge tiers network, enemies will be able to deal higher and higher levels of max damage to a player before this protection kicks in. Okay, so now that we've got all the stats and factual information from this Reddit post out of the way, I wanted to weigh in on everything that was just laid out for us, including those hidden mechanics. Now, I know that many of us have suspected that these hidden mechanics were at play, and to see them clearly in text form certainly answers a few questions, such as, why am I taking more or less damage at certain times than I feel I should be? Now, knowing which mitigation mechanics will deflect to certain types of enemy attacks is helpful, such as if you plan on taking on primarily beast missions, you would probably want to invest into resistance and resistance piercing to take on those alphas and broodmothers, and if you plan on tackling missions versus insurgents, then you need as much armor as possible. Now, what would make this all so much easier is if we were to have an actual saved loadout system in the game that would allow us to quickly change our setups on the fly depending on what enemy type we are being tasked with fighting. But all of this information, and don't get me wrong, I am thankful for it, now brings me to what I base today's thumbnail off of, and it comes down to all of these different mitigations versus the in-game mechanics. And let's be clear here, once you finish the campaign, the entire in-game portion of this game, every challenge tier, everything is predicated on one thing: speed. There is only one mode for CT clears, and it is time attack. How fast can you clear the level of enemies and make it to the drop pod? End of story. Furthermore, the reward structure is structured on finishing the highest possible tier, in this case Challenge Tier 15, within the gold tier times to stand a chance of receiving the highest levels of legendary gear drops. Even the graphics at the start of each expedition show you how your rewards are severely affected should you not finish on a gold tier time. So again, everything in this in-game structure is based on speed and damage output, so that we can essentially overpower the enemy targets with the clear mission of finishing the time attack in the allotted time. Furthermore, and I saw this mentioned in the Reddit post, but how these mechanics work during the campaign have zero relevance to someone playing through Outriders, because during that phase of your gameplay sessions, your gear is a hodgepodge of this and that. we aren't focused on. I need more resistance, or maybe I should switch around my gear for more armor. All that I focused on during my campaign was equipping the highest gear level items that had firepower, and weapons that could hit hard with attributes like long range and crit damage. So, what we are specifically focusing on here is the end-game mechanics. Highest tier possible plus speed equals rewards, and that's the end-game equation. I would love to try different builds like a non-devastator tank or something really out there, but in the end it comes down to pushing out the most damage possible in the fastest time available. I mean, did anyone in the planning phase for Outriders endgame actually raise their hands at that meeting and point out this fact? I mean, we've got all these skill trees, mods, and classes that can lead to an insane amount of combinations, but the way our endgame is set up, it is only structured for a time attack scenario. So naturally, players are only going to use mods, classes, and skills that will boost their damage to higher and higher levels. Furthermore, the team advocates us playing at the highest level CT missions in squads by boosting enemy damage output and enemy resistance to our damage output. So again, this only strengthens our need to solely spec into damage output or face the fact that we are going to get folded by not overpowering our targets. Now, the only way to move away from this is to completely restructure what endgame is in Outriders, and this will require a fundamental rework to add in different challenge tier modes and even events. I appreciate the knowledge of the differing damage types, but to be brutally honest here, I don't have time to look at what is coming at me in the game and decide what the best line of attack would be. Combat in Outriders is frenetic, and I adhere to just one policy: shoot anything moving before it gets too close to me. I know to aim for certain portions of enemy forms in order to apply critical strikes, but when I'm being swarmed by like 20 to 30 enemies, I have maybe 0.2 of a second to decide what to do or just face certain death. Now, just like so many of you out there, I have those same two options. I can spec heavily into damage mods to overpower the mobs and ensure I stand a chance, or I can sacrifice damage output and perhaps survive a little bit longer, but not be able to down targets in a timely manner, and either eventually get swarmed over, or if I do finish the run, finish above the gold timer and receive little to no loot. And you can probably guess what option I have chosen to go with. As I've been reading these frequent posts by the dev team, they often mention the fact that they are taking the players' feedback into account, and I guess I would like to know who these players are. I mean, asking a question over on Reddit will lead to a million different needs by a million different users, so I wouldn't place that much faith on what can be harvested through that platform. Now, my personal recommendation is that People Can Fly needs to find a small cross-section of Outriders faithful from across the planet, get them all into one discussion, either virtually or, if possible, in person, and then start the brainstorming session. Limit it to something like 15 players plus representatives from each portion of the dev team, and then let them hash out the details of this game moving forwards. The Division franchise did this with their ETF initiative, where they would bring in something like 12 to 15 players from around the world, run a bunch of possible changes to the game by them, and then let that team work out all the little details. What we need is alternatives and action taken to change the game moving forwards, as this current meta will only be changed once the actual format for expeditions is changed as well. As I always do with all my Outriders uploads, I would like to invite you all to join my community Discord server. Just check in this video description, click on the link, accept those rules, and you are in. And once there, one of our moderators will get you acclimated and pointed in the general right direction, and we've got all sorts of channels for chat, farming, and of course carries. Also, just added, and I owe all the credit to my mod team, they've just added a full build channel with build breakdowns and easy to follow photos. Now, these builds include all the mods, weaponry, and gear, along with what the builds are designed to do, their pros and cons, and overall abilities. If you're getting frustrated with Outriders and possibly the endgame matchmaker, join my Discord and be in a group on mics hitting your chosen content in a matter of minutes. Maybe you need a hard carrier, just want to chill out and farm. Well, in our Outriders community, we've got all of that covered for you and more. As always, I look forward to reading your feedback in the comments section below. If you haven't done so already, please smash that sub button and ring the bell to receive all future upload notifications from my channel. If you could take the time to rate and or share this video, that would be greatly appreciated. Don't forget to find and follow me over on Twitch with weekly Outriders CT carry streams. Join my aforementioned Discord server for all things Outriders related. And of course, you can find me over on Twitter posting on most things gaming related. Links to all these platforms in the video description below. Until the next one, this is LtBuzzLitebeer signing off.